Snow sealed the Alpine chalet, cutting off all escape, but it couldn't bury the truth. When a scream shattered the icy silence, Hercule Poirot realized this wasn't just a blizzard, it was the perfect cover for a murder carefully planned, and even more carefully hidden. The Alpine ski resort stood as a monument to opulence, its golden stone walls rising. Against a backdrop of jagged snow-draped peaks, icicles clung to the eaves, catching the fading sunlight in prisms of color, while the vast silence of the mountains enveloped the scene, broken only by the occasional creak of a pine bough bending under its wintry burden. The air was crisp and biting, laced with the scent of frost and woods, and the resort itself a labyrinth of turrets, balconies, and wide windows promised a haven of warmth and luxury for those wealthy enough to claim it. This was no common retreat, it was a sanctuary for the elite, a place where the privileged came to revel in seclusion. Hercule Poirot, however, had not chosen this destination. For its grandeur his physician had insisted upon rest, citing the fatigue that lingered after a particularly arduous case. The Alpine air, renowned for its restorative qualities, had been prescribed as a tonic, and so here he stood, stepping from a sleek motor car that had borne him up the winding mountain road. His small, precise figure was bundled in a heavy overcoat, his mustache immaculately waxed, gleaming defiantly against the cold. As he surveyed the scene, his sharp green eyes flickered with interest, taking in every detail. The porter's hurried gait, the faint mist of his own breath, the way the snow muffled all sound into a hush behind him. Gore, his valet, directed the handling of their luggage with quiet efficiency. The cases were few, but chosen with care, a testament to Poirot's fastidious nature. Adjusting his gloves, Poirot gave his mustache a brisk tweak and turned to his companion. "A fine spectacle, Gore, do you not agree?" he said, his voice carrying the faint lilt of his Belgian heritage. "Most striking, Sir." Gore replied, his tone as steady as his demeanor, a place of rare beauty. At the grand entrance, they were greeted by M. Dupont, the resort manager, a man whose polished exterior, tailored suit, gleaming cufflinks, and a smile of practiced warmth suggested a lifetime spent catering to the whims of the rich. Yet Poirot noted a fleeting shadow in the man's eyes, a tremor beneath the surface that belied his composure. "Miss Poirot, we are honored to have you among us," Dupont said, extending a gloved hand. "I trust your journey was agreeable." "Quite tolerable, merci." Poirot answered, his tone courteous, but reserved. "The mountains, they have a way of commanding one's attention." Dupont's smile tightened ever so slightly. "We strive to offer our guests the utmost in comfort and discretion. Allow me to show you to your suite." They crossed into the lobby, a cavernous space of breathtaking splendor. Chandeliers of cut crystal hung like frozen stars, casting light across a floor of polished marble that gleamed like a still lake. Deep burgundy set lined the walls, their velvet richness contrasting with the stark white of the snow visible through towering windows. A fire blazed in a hearth large enough to roast an ox, its crackling warmth mingling with the delicate strains of a piano drifting from some hidden recess. Miss Clara, the head stewardess, approached with a brisk nod. Her uniform was impeccable, her auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a cap, and her eyes sharp and assessing. Met Poirot with a flicker of curiosity. "Welcome, sure, Poirot. Your suite is ready, and tea will be brought presently." "Merci, Mademoiselle," Poirot said, inclining his head. "You are most diligent." As they ascended a grand staircase, Poirot's gaze was drawn to a figure descending, a woman of striking elegance. Her fur-trimmed coat, trailing behind her like a cloak, her dark hair was swept into a shiny, and her features, though beautiful, bore the weight of some unspoken burden. She paused briefly, her eyes brushing over Poirot with a hint of recognition before she continued her descent. "Madame Elena Rossi," Dupont whispered, his voice low. "The opera singer. She seeks solitude here before her next performance." Poirot's interest sharpened. Madame Rossi's voice was famed across Europe, a soprano of such power and purity that it could move the hardest heart. Yet in that fleeting glance he detected a melancholy, a discord beneath her poised exterior that intrigued him. The suite, when they reached it, was a masterpiece of luxury. Its wide windows framed a panorama of snow-laden peaks, the glass misting faintly at the edges from the contrast of warmth within and cold without. Gore set to unpacking with his usual precision while Poirot stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out at the twilight, settling over the mountains. The scene was one of serene perfection, yet a faint unease stirred within him, an instinct honed by years of unraveling human secrets. A soft knock announced Miss Clara's return, bearing a tray of tea and pastries arranged with meticulous care. "Your tea, Miss Poirot. Is there anything else you require?" "No, merci," he replied, though his eyes lingered on her a moment longer. There was a watchfulness about her, a quiet alertness that suggested she saw more than she revealed. "You have anticipated all, mademoiselle." She withdrew with a nod, leaving Poirot to pour his tea. The warmth of the cup seeped into his chilled hands as he inhaled its fragrant steam. The resort was a marvel, every detail designed to soothe and enchant, yet beneath its polished surface he sensed a thread of tension, a whisper of something out of place as dusk deepened, painting the snow in hues of violet and amber. Poirot settled into an armchair by the fire. He had come for rest, but his mind, ever restless, was already sifting through the impressions of the day. Dupin's strained smile, Miss Clara's vigilance, Madame Rossi's shadowed grace. The stage was set, the characters assembled, though he knew it not. The tranquil retreat was on the brink of a mystery that would summon his keenest faculties, a puzzle of human nature laid bare against the frozen splendor of the Alps. The morning dawned crisp and brilliant over the Alpine resort, the sun gilding the snow with a sheen that dazzled the eye. Hercule Poirot sat at a corner table in the dining room, his breakfast a study in precision, a soft-boiled egg, its shell gleaming, toast points arranged like soldiers, and a pot of tisane, its steam curling upward in delicate tendrils. He sipped the herbal brew, savoring its warmth against the chill that lingered from the night, while his sharp green eyes roamed the room, cataloging the guests with quiet interest. The murmur of conversation, refined yet faintly strained, blended with the clink of silver on porcelain, a symphony of wealth that Poirot found both soothing and faintly hollow. He was lifting his spoon to tap his egg when a sharp cry pierced the air, a sound of raw distress that silenced the room. Forks hovered, voices faltered, and Poirot set his spoon down with deliberate care, his senses alert. Moments later, a young maid stumbled through the doors, her face flushed, her breath ragged. "Muse Dupin," she gasped. "It's Madame Rossi. She's dead." A ripple of shock swept the room, followed by a clamor of voices. Poirot rose swiftly, his breakfast abandoned, and made his way to Msai Dupin, who had emerged from the shadows near the entrance, his polished demeanor cracking. "What is this, Marie?" he demanded, his voice tight. "Speak plainly." "Outside her chalet," the maid stammered, "frozen in the snow. I found her just now." Dupin's face drained of color. "Monsieur," he muttered, then turned to Miss Clara, who had appeared at his side, her expression composed despite the chaos. "Keep the guests calm, Miss Clara. Fetch Dr. Vogel immediately." "Of course, monsieur," she replied, her voice steady as she addressed the room. "Please, everyone remain seated. There is no need for alarm." Poirot stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "Monsieur Dupin, permit me to accompany you. In such matters, a second pair of eyes may prove useful." Dupin hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, ma Poirot, your presence is appreciated." They hastened through the lobby, the cold biting at their faces as they emerged into the snow-laden grounds. The air was sharp with frost, the silence of the mountains broken by the crunch of their boots. Near Madame Rossi's chalet, a small knot of staff and guests had gathered, their faces etched with horror. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, the chalet door ajar, a faint trail of footprints leading to a crumpled form half buried in the drift. Madame Rossi lay on her side, her crimson robe stark against the white, her hair spilling loose like spilled ink. Her skin was pallid, her lips faintly blue, and her eyes, wide and glassy, stared into eternity. Poirot knelt beside her, his gloved hand brushing snow from her cheek. A star extinguished, he thought, though his mind was already sifting the details with methodical precision. Dr. Vogel arrived, his medical bag clutched tightly, his breath clouding in the frigid air. He crouched beside the body, his examination brisk and assured. After a moment he rose, brushing snow from his knees. "Hypothermia," he pronounced. She wandered out in the night, poorly dressed for the cold. "A tragic accident, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt stirring. "You are certain, doctor?" Vogel's jaw tightened. "Quite certain, Mu." Poirot looked at her, pale, rigid, clad only in that robe. The cold claimed her swiftly. And yet Poirot said softly, almost to himself, "There's something out of place." He leaned closer, his gaze fixing on a tiny mark on her wrist, a puncture, so small it might have been overlooked. He inhaled delicately, catching a faint bitter scent that clung to her robe. Almonds, he thought, his pulse quickening, the signature of cyanide. He turned to Vogel, his voice mild but probing. "This mark, doctor, what do you make of it?" Vogel squinted, then shrugged. "A scratch, perhaps, or an insect bite." Its insignificant lips curved faintly. "In my experience, Dr. Little is insignificant." He stood, his eyes scanning the snow around the body. Footprints crisscrossed the scene, some fresh from the onlookers, others older, partially filled with snow. A clue, or a distraction, he wondered, filing the observation away. Dupont hovered nearby, his hands twisting together. "This is a disaster," he muttered. "Madame Rossi was our pride. If the papers hear of this—" "Calm yourself," Poirot said, resting a hand on his arm. "We shall proceed with care. Tell me, when was she last seen alive?" "Last night at dinner," Dupont replied, swallowing hard. "She retired early, claiming fatigue. No one saw her after." "And her chalet, was it secured?" "I cannot say," Dupont admitted. "The staff have keys, but guests may lock their doors as they wish." Poirot nodded, then turned to Miss Clara, who stood at the crowd's edge, her pale face a mask of control. "Mademoiselle, did you note anything unusual last night? Any activity near the chalets?" Her eyes flickered briefly. "No, Miss Poirot, it was quiet, though I saw Madame Rossi in the lounge before she retired. She was speaking with someone, a man, I think, but it was too dim to see clearly." Poirot's interest sharpened. "A man? Could you describe him?" She shook her head. "I was too far, and the light was poor. They seemed engaged." "Perhaps a disagreement, though I heard no raised voices." "Most curious," Poirot murmured. He glanced back at the body, his mind racing. "A puncture, a scent of almonds, a late night encounter. This is no accident. Madame Rossi had been murdered, and the killer was likely among them, hidden behind a mask of innocence." He turned to George, who had joined him silently. "George, my friend, fetch my notebook. Our rest, it seems, is at an end." "As you wish, sir," George replied, his tone even. Poirot straightened, his gaze sweeping the assembled faces, some shocked, some curious. A few guarded the luxurious resort with its golden warmth and snow-draped splendor had become a stage for tragedy. The game was afoot, and Hercule would unravel its threads with the patience and precision that had made him legendary. The library of the Alpine resort stood as a bastion of warmth against the encroaching chill, its oak paneled walls and towering shelves of leather-bound volumes exuding an air of timeless repose. A fire blazed in the hearth, its golden light dancing across the room, while beyond the wide windows snow fell in a ceaseless silent shroud cloaking the peaks. In mystery, Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed chair near the fire, his small meticulous figure a picture of composure. In his gloved hands he cradled a cup of hot chocolate, prepared to his exacting standards, its rich aroma mingling with the faint scent of aged paper. He awaited the arrival of Mademoiselle Sophia Moretti, the understudy to the late Madame Elena Rossi, with the calm anticipation of a hunter studying his quarry. Turning to Gore, who stood discreetly near the door, Poirot said, "Madame, would you be so good as to locate Mademoiselle Moretti and request her presence here? I believe she is in the lounge." Gore inclined his head and departed without a sound, his efficiency a silent testament to their long partnership. As he waited, Poirot's sharp green eyes roamed the library, lingering on a shelf of opera scores, Tosca, La Traviata, and others, each a silent witness to the artistry of the woman now lost to the snow. His mind returned to Madame Rossi's death, the puncture mark on her wrist, the faint whiff of almonds betraying cyanide, an area she had been rehearsing. He mused, might it sing of more than tragedy? On the stage the door creaked open, and Miss Clara ushered in a young woman of striking allure. Sophia Moretti was tall and her raven hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders, her dark eyes alight with a blend of ambition and unease. She wore a dress of deep sapphire, its elegant simplicity accentuating her grace, yet Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands as she smoothed its folds. He rose to greet her, his manner polished, but his gaze piercing as a blade. "Madame Omo, was El Moretti? I am Hercule Poirot. Thank you for joining me," he said, his voice carrying the gentle cadence of his Belgian roots. Sophia offered A hesitant smile, her lips parting briefly before she spoke. "Of course, Miss Poirot, though I confess I am uncertain why you wish to see me." "Pray sit," Poirot replied, gesturing to a chair opposite him. "It is a small matter, a few questions. Only you were, I understand, the understudy to Madame Rossi. A role of great distinction." She settled into the seat, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. "Yes, it was an honor to study beneath her. She was extraordinary." And yet Poirot continued, his tone soft but insistent. To stand so near to such brilliance, it must have been at times a trial. "No." A shadow flitted across Sophia's face, her eyes darting to the fire before returning to his. "I suppose it could be, but I never wished her ill. She taught me so much." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his fingers steepled before him. "Naturel, mademoiselle, tell me, did Madame Rossi speak of her work, of the area she was rehearsing, perhaps?" Sophia hesitated, her fingers twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. She kept her preparations private, but the lyrics, they were haunting. "A tale of betrayal, I think, a lover's treachery." "Betrayal," Poirot echoed, his interest quickening like a pulse, "most intriguing." And did she seem affected by this area, as if its words held some deeper meaning for her? Sophia's gaze dropped to her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "I cannot say for certain. She was reserved, though. She was distracted these past days." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words with care. "And you, mademoiselle, did you see her on the night she died, perhaps in the lounge, as Miss Clara observed?" Sophia's head snapped up, a flicker of alarm in her eyes. Yes, briefly. She was speaking with someone, a man, but I did not stay. It was not my place." "A man?" Poirot repeated, his voice a velvet thread. "Could you describe him?" She shook her head, her composure fraying like worn silk. "It was very dark, and I was not near. They seemed intent, and I think that it was Monsieur Peterson, the ski instructor. Perhaps a dispute, though I heard no harsh words." "Most curious," Poirot murmured, his eyes narrowing. He paused, then shifted his line of inquiry. "Did Madame Rossi have enemies?" "Mademoiselle, anyone who might have borne her malice?" Sophia's lips parted, then pressed shut. "Not enemies precisely. She was exacting. Some found her difficult. There was a critic, I recall, who wrote a cruel review. Once she took it hard." Pooh's gaze sharpened. "A critic, you say? Do you know his name?" "I think it was her Bauer, France Bauer, but I may be mistaken." "Mercy, mademoiselle, you have been most illuminating." Poirot rose, signaling the interviews, and Sophia stood, as well, her relief a palpable current in the air. As she reached the door, Poirot added, "One final thing, mademoiselle. Did you notice anything unusual in Madame Rossi's manner of late? Any hint of fear or distress?" Sophia paused, her hand on the knob. "She was quieter than usual, and once I saw her reading a letter that seemed to trouble her, but she said nothing of it." Poirot inclined his head. "Thank you. That will be all." She slipped out the door, closing softly behind her. Poirot turned to Gore, who had stood silent throughout, his presence a steady anchor. "A nervous young woman, George. Her ambition shines through her, but is it a flame that consumes? And this area, it is a melody with a hidden note. I must discern its tune." Before Gore could reply, a sharp knock announced Msai Dupin's arrival. The manager entered, his polished facade marred by a crease of worry. "Monsieur Poirot, forgive the intrusion. The guests are restless. They fear for their safety." Poirot smiled faintly, a gleam of reassurance in his eyes. "Fear not, Mr. Dupin. The truth, it has a way of restoring order, even amidst the most delicate snowflakes. Assure your guests that Hercule Poirot is at work." Dupin's tension eased slightly. "Merci, Msai. Your confidence is a balm." As the manager withdrew, Poirot adjusted his tie with a precise flick, his reflection in the glass-fronted bookcase confirming his impeccable appearance. Yet beneath his calm exterior, his mind churned, sifting through the thread Sophia had unwittingly spun, her unease, the area's theme of betrayal, the critic's name, her friend Bauer, the mention of a man in the lounge, echoed Miss Clara's observation from the night before, a strand yet to be untangled, and the letter, the stage, was widening, the players revealing their masks one by one. He gazed out at the snow-laden peaks, their silent majesty a stark contrast to the turmoil within the resort's walls. The mystery of Madame Rossi's death was no longer a faint whisper, but a crescendo building toward its climax. The truth, as ever, would emerge through patience and precision, qualities Hercule Poirot possessed in abundance. The library of the Alpine resort retained its air of hushed reverence as the afternoon waned its oak pan-led walls absorbing the faint crackle of the fire that blazed in the hearth beyond the wide windows. The snow fell in a relentless curtain cloaking the peaks in a shroud of white that seemed to press against the glass. Hercule Poirot stood near the hearth, his gloved hands clasped. Behind his back, the warmth of the room was a balm against the chill outside, yet his sharp green eyes betrayed a mind far from repose. The interview with Sophia Moretti lingered in his thoughts, her nervous demeanor, her mention of Herr Franz Bauer, the critic whose harsh words had wounded Madame Rossi. A thread had emerged, and Poirot intended to follow it with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. He turned to Gore, who stood near the door, with his customary quiet efficiency. Gore Moni, would you request Whodunit to arrange a meeting with Herba? I should like to speak with him presently. Of course, Sir. Gore replied, his voice a steady murmur. As he departed, Poirot adjusted his tie with a deft flick, his reflection in the glass-fronted bookcase confirming his impeccable appearance. The resort's luxurious facade concealed a tangle of motives, and Bauer, a man of influence in the opera world, might hold a key to unraveling them. Sophia's words echoed. A critic who had crossed Madame Rossi. Could it be mere coincidence, or the prelude to murder? The door opened, admitting Cy Dupin, his polished exterior marred by a faint sheen of perspiration on his brow. Miss Poirot, he said, his tone strained. Herr Bauer is in the lounge. He is not pleased to be summoned, but he has agreed to meet you in a private sitting room nearby. I beg you be discreet. This affair threatens the resort's reputation. Pooh's lips curved faintly. Fear not, Mr. Dupin. Discretion is my watchword. Lead on, if you please. They traversed the corridor, the muffled thud of their steps swallowed by the thick carpet. The sitting room was a cozy enclave off the main lounge, its walls adorned with Alpine landscapes in gilded frames, its furnishings a blend of plush, velvet, and polished wood. A fire crackled in a modest hearth, casting a warm glow across a pair of armchairs arranged before a low table. Poirot took his place, and one gesturing for Dupin to depart with a courteous nod. Moments later, Herr Franz Bauer entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. He was a man of imposing presence, his silver hair swept back from a high forehead, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. His charcoal gray suit was tailored to perfection, its severity softened by a silk cravat at his throat, yet his posture carried a tension that belied his refinement. He paused, assessing Poirot with a gaze that bordered on disdain. Monsieur Poirot, Boss said, his voice smooth but edged with impatience, I understand you wish to speak with me. I trust this will be brief. I have work to attend. Indeed, Herr Bauer, Poirot replied, rising with a polite incline of his head. I am grateful for your time. Please sit. It is a small matter, a few questions only. Bauer hesitated, then settled into the opposite chair, crossing his legs with deliberate care. His hands rested lightly on the armrests, though Poirot noted the faint twitch of his fingers, a sign of unease beneath the polished veneer. I cannot imagine what I might contribute to your inquiries, Bauer said, his tone clipped. I am a critic here to review the gala, not to meddle in whatever this is. Poirot's smile was disarming, his eyes twinkling with a deceptive mildness. Ah, but a critic sees much, does he not? Your observations are renowned for their insight. Tell me, what did you make of Madame Rossi's artistry? Bauer's lips thinned, a flicker of disdain crossing his face. She was a talent once, but her later performances lacked the fire of her youth. A critic must speak the truth. Sigh Poirot, even when it stings truth, it is a noble pursuit. Poirot agreed, his voice soft as velvet. And Madame Rosie, she took your critiques to heart. I hear such is the burden of the artist. No, Bauer shrugged, the gesture too casual to convince. She was a diva. They all are sensitive to praise and blame alike. It is the nature of their world. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his fingers steepled before him. And on the night of her death, Herr Bauer, you were writing a review, I believe, for an upcoming production. Yes, Bauer replied, his tone sharpening. A piece on the Milan opera season. I retired to my room after dinner and worked late into the night. Might I see this review? Poirot asked, his voice casual, almost idle. I have always been curious about the critic's craft, how one distills art into words. Bauer's eyes narrowed, a flash of weariness crossing his features. It is unfinished, and I do not share my work before publication. Surely you understand, naturellement, Poirot said, though his smile did not waver. but perhaps you could show me your notes, or the draft it would assist. Me in establishing the timeline of that evening. Bowers' jaw tightened, but he rose abruptly. Very well, if you insist, come with me to my room. I will show you what I have. They left the sitting room, traversing the corridor to Bowers' suite. The space was a reflection of its occupant, orderly, austere, with a writing desk by the window and a neat stack of papers beside a gleaming typewriter. Bookshelves lined one wall, their volumes a testament to Bowers' erudition, while a faint scent of ink and tobacco hung in the air. Bauer rifled through the papers, selecting a few sheets. With a reluctant hand, "Here," he said, thrusting them toward Poirot. "My notes for the review. As you can see, they are quite detailed." Poirot glanced at the pages, his eyes scanning the precise handwriting, dates, names, critiques of singers yet to take the stage in Milan. Yet as Bauer turned to replace a stray sheet, Poirot's gaze drifted to the desk drawer left slightly ajar. Through the gap he spied a small vial, its pale liquid catching the light like a secret unveiled. "What is this?" Herr Bauer asked, his voice mild as he reached for the vial. With a gloved hand, Bauer's hand shot out, snatching it back with a speed that betrayed his calm. "That is nothing, a trinket from a trip to Venice, a curiosity, nothing more." Poirot's eyebrows rose, his interest sharpening like a blade. "A curious souvenir, indeed. Might I examine it?" Bauer's face flushed, his composure cracking. "It is private, monsieur. I must ask you to respect that." Poirot held his gaze for a long moment, then inclined his head. "As you wish. I shall not press the matter for now." He handed the notes back to Bauer, his mind racing. The vial could have contained the cyanide that silenced Madame Rossi, and Bauer's reaction, fear or merely irritation at the intrusion. Poirot filed the observation away, a piece of the puzzle yet to be placed. "Thank you for your time, Herr Bauer," he said, his tone courteous but firm. "You have been most cooperative." As he left the room, Poirot's thoughts churned. Bauer's secret, hinted at by Sophia, the bribery Madame Rossi had threatened to expose, cast a shadow over his alibi. The vial, so hastily concealed, pointed to guilt, yet something nagged at him, a whisper of doubt that refused to be silenced. The truth, he knew, was often more elusive than it appeared. He found Miss Clara in the lounge, her hands deftly arranging a vase of winter roses. "Mademoiselle," he said, approaching with a polite nod. "A question, if I may. On the night of Madame Rossi's death, did you see her, Bauer, at any time?" She paused, her sharp eyes meeting his eye. "Saw him leave his room briefly around midnight. He seemed agitated, but he returned quickly. I thought little of it then." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. "And did he carry anything with him?" She shook her head. "Not that I recall, though he did glance about, as if ensuring he was not observed." "Mercy, mademoiselle, you have been most helpful." As Miss Clara resumed her task, Poirot stepped to the window, gazing out at the snow-laden peaks. The resort's tranquility was a facade, a glittering mask over a web of secrets. Bauer's bribery, the vial, his late-night excursion, it all wore a tapestry of suspicion around him. Yet Poirot's instinct whispered of other threads. Sophia's ambition, the man in the lounge. Miss Clara had glimpsed the letter that had troubled Madame Rossi. The critic was a suspect, yes, but the stage was crowded with players yet to reveal their roles. He turned to Gore, who had appeared at his side with the quiet grace of a shadow. "Gore, my friend, we must proceed with care. The puzzle grows complex, but the pieces, they will align in time." "Indeed, Sir," Gore replied, his voice a steady anchor. Poirot straightened his coat with a precise tug, his mind already tracing the next steps. The game was deepening, the stakes rising with each revelation, but Hercule Poirot was no stranger to such challenges. With patience and insight, he would unravel the mystery thread by meticulous thread. The lounge of the Alpine resort glowed with the warmth of a roaring fire, its golden light spilling across the polished wood and plush velvet of the furnishings. Beyond the wide windows, the snow fell in a relentless veil, softening the jagged peaks into a dreamlike haze. Hercule sat in a corner alcove, his small, meticulous figure framed by the flicker of flames, his gloved hands resting lightly on the arms of his chair. The room buzzed with the low hum of guests, some sipping cognac, others recounting their triumphs on the slopes. But Poirot's sharp green eyes were fixed on one man alone, Luca Peterson, the ski instructor, whose heated exchange with Madame Elena Rossi had been whispered about since her death. Luca moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, his tall, athletic frame cutting a striking silhouette. Against the firelight, his sun-bronzed skin and easy smile marked him as a man at home in this Alpine world. Yet Poirot noted the tension in his shoulders, the fleeting shadows that darkened his gaze when he thought himself unobserved. Here was a man who wore charm like a cloak, but beneath it lay a story of bitterness, a grudge perhaps deep enough to kill. Poirot turned to Gore, who stood discreetly at his side, ever the silent sentinel. Gore, mon ami, would you kindly ask Mrs. Patterson to join me for a moment? I believe he is near the bar. Of course, Sir George replied, gliding away with his usual efficiency. Moments later, Lucer approached, his expression a careful blend of curiosity and caution. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice smooth but tinged with weariness. You wish to speak with me? Yes, Mr. Peterson, please sit. Poirot said, gesturing to the chair opposite. It is a small matter, a few questions only regarding Madame Elena Rossi. Luca sat, his hands resting on his knees, though Poirot caught the faint clench of his fingers, a sign of unease beneath the polished exterior. I'm not sure what I can tell you, Luca began, his tone measured. I barely knew her, and yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but insistent, you were seen arguing with her before her death. The heated exchange, I am told. Can you explain why? Luca's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger crossing his face. It was nothing, a disagreement about her lessons, she was demanding. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his eyes piercing as a blade. I think there's more to it, Miss Peterson. I have heard that Madame Rossi played a role in your past, a significant one, your expulsion from medical school. Perhaps. Luca's face palled, his composure cracking like ice underfoot. How did you know that? Poirot's smile was disarming, his tone gentle but unrelenting. Your reaction when I mentioned Madame Rossi's name, I'm sure, was most telling, and the medical textbook on your shelf, half hidden among your ski manuals, it spoke of a past you wished to forget. From there, it was a simple matter to make discreet inquiries among the staff. Please tell me what happened. Luca sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of years pressed upon him. It was long ago. I was young, reckless. Madame Rossi was a patron of the school, a woman of influence, and she took an interest in me. I misused her affection, flattered her to gain favor. When she learned of my deception, she had me expelled. She ruined my career before it began. And you blamed her for it? Poirot asked, his voice a delicate probe. Yes. Luca admitted, his voice raw with bitterness. I blamed her. She could have shown mercy, but she chose to destroy me. Instead, I've rebuilt my life here teaching on the slopes, but the scar remains. Poirot studied him, noting the pain etched into his features, the way his hands clenched as he spoke. And on the night of her death, he continued, you argued with her again. Why? Luca's eyes dropped to the floor, his voice low. She mocked me. She saw me with a group of guests and said I was wasting my potential, a mere ski instructor, when I could have been a doctor. It had stung, and I lashed out, but I swear, Morrow, I did not kill her. Poirot's gaze softened, though his mind remained vigilant. Where were you at the time of her death, Mr. Peterson? I was in my room asleep. Luca replied, his tone steady. I have no one to vouch for me, but I did not leave my quarters that night. You must believe me. Poirot leaned back, his fingers tapping thoughtfully on the armrest. I am inclined to believe you, Mr. Peterson. Your anger is real, yes, but it is not the anger of a killer. It is the anger of a man who mourns what might have been. Luca's eyes widened, a mixture of relief and surprise flooding his face. You believe me? Yes, Poirot said, his tone firm but kind, but I must ask you to keep this conversation private. The investigation continues, and I do not wish to alert the true culprit. Luca nodded, his gratitude palpable. Thank you, Miss Poirot. I won't forget this. As Luca rose and slipped back into the crowd, Poirot turned to Gore, who had observed the exchange with his usual quiet attentiveness. A tragic tale, Gore. Poirot murmured, his grudge is deep, yet I sense no malice sharp enough to pierce a life. He is not our man, indeed, Sir George replied. But if not him, then who? Poirot's eyes gleamed with a quiet determination. That, my friend, is the question, and the answer lies hidden among these gilded walls. He rose, smoothing his coat with a precise gesture, his mind already sifting through the threads of the case. The aria Madame Rossi had rehearsed. Its theme of betrayal echoed in his thoughts, a haunting refrain that might connect to Lucas. Story, could he have been the man Miss Clara saw with her in the lounge, or did that shadow belong to another Herr Bauer, perhaps with his secret bribes, or Sophia Moretti, whose ambition burned beneath her fragile facade? A soft laugh drew his attention. Across the room, Sophia Moretti stood near the hearth, her sapphire dress catching the light as she spoke with a guest. Her poise was impeccable, yet Poirot recalled the tremor in her hands during their earlier meeting, the unease in her eyes when she spoke of Madame Rossi. She had been in the lounge that night to another witness to the opera singer's final hours. Was her ambition merely a spark or a flame that had consumed her rival? Poirot's gaze shifted to the window, where the snow continued its silent descent. The resort's opulence was a veneer, a glittering mask over a web of motives: Bauer's bribery, Vogel's debts, Lucas' grudge, Sophia's envy, the puncture mark on Madame Rossi's wrist, the faint scent of almonds. These were the notes of a deadly melody, and Poirot was determined to decipher its score. He turned to Gore, his voice low but resolute. "We must proceed with care, Gore. The truth is near, yet it dances just beyond my grasp, but rest assured it will not elude Hercule Poirot for long." As they left the lounge, Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The ski instructor's tale was a poignant diversion, but the real killer remained at large there. Mask intact for now, the game was deepening, the stakes rising with each step, and Poirot welcomed the challenge with the quiet confidence of a master at work. The infirmary of the Alpine resort stood as a stark contrast to its opulent surroundings, a chamber of clinical precision nestled within the golden glow of luxury. Its walls were lined with glass-fronted cabinets, the shelves bearing rows of vials and instruments that gleamed faintly in the firelight. A small hearth crackled with a modest flame, casting shadows across a sturdy oak desk cluttered with medical journals and a cold cup of coffee. The air carried a sharp tang of antiseptic, undercut by the warmth of burning logs, a duality that Hercule found oddly fitting as he stepped inside, his polished shoes silent on the polished floor. Dr. Vogel sat behind the desk, his spectacles perched low on his nose, his fingers tapping an uneven rhythm against the wood. He looked up as Poirot entered, his professional calm faltering for a moment, a flicker of weariness crossing his lined face. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, rising with a stiff nod, "I did not expect to see you again so soon. To what do I owe this visit?" Poirot inclined his head, his sharp green eyes sweeping the room, the tremor in Vogel's hand, the faint disarray of papers, a crumpled betting slip half hidden beneath a journal. "A small matter, doctor," he replied, his voice smooth as velvet. "I seek only to clarify a few details regarding Madame Rossi's untimely demise. You will indulge me, I trust." Vogel's smile was tight, his fingers tightening briefly on the desk's edge. "I have told you all I know. Sure, hypothermia, tragic, but simple, and there is nothing more to say." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze steady, his tone polite but insistent. "And yet, doctor, certain observations trouble me. The puncture mark on her wrist, for instance, and the faint scent of almonds. A curious note, would you not agree, for a death by cold?" Vogel's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the window where snow fell in a relentless shroud against the darkening peaks. "A scratch, as I said before, and this scented is your fancy, Miss Poirot. The mountains can deceive even the keenest senses." Pooh's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "My senses, doctor, are rarely mistaken, nor is my reason, which has pondered this case with care. Tell me, have you no suspicion of foul play, or is there a reason you cling so stubbornly to your diagnosis?" Vogel's face flushed, his composure fracturing like ice under strain. "I am a physician, monsieur, not a detective. I report what I see, facts, not fantasies. Madame Rossi died of exposure. That is the end of it." Poirot's gaze sharpened, though his voice remained soft. "Facts, yes, but facts can be shaped by other influences. I have learned, for instance, that you are a man under pressure, gambling debts, perhaps a burden that might make one unhonorable to suggestion." Vogel froze, his breath catching as if Poirot had struck a hidden wound. How did you come by such nonsense?" he stammered, his hands trembling visibly. "Now a detective must listen to the whispers, doctor." Poirot said, his smile unwavering. "The resort is a small world, and secrets travel swiftly. I know of a certain creditor, a man not known for patience. Could it be that he pressed you to obscure the truth of Madame Rossi's death?" Vogel's hands shook, his voice rising In desperation that is preposterous, I am no puppet to be strung along by threats. My debts are my own affair, nothing to do with her, and yet Poirot pressed his tone, a gentle blade, your prescriptions. Intrigue me, unusual medications, some quite potent cyanide, for instance, it is not beyond a doctor's reach. Is it? Vogel's face drained of color, his eyes wide with panic. You cannot believe I poisoned her. I had no cause, no reason to harm Madame Rossi. She was nothing to me, but a patient, a guest. Hero leaned forward, his gaze piercing. But perhaps she knew something, doctor, something that threatened you or your creditor. Did she stumble upon your troubles? Did she confront you? Vogel slumped into his chair, his shoulders sagging as if crushed by an unseen weight. She knew nothing, but yes, I am in debt deeply. So a man came to me, a shadow from the valley. He demanded I assist him. I feared for my life. Miss Poirot. Poirot's interest quickened, his mind racing. Assist him? How, doctor? By declaring her death an accident, by ignoring the poison that silenced her. Vogel's silence was a confession, his gaze fixed on the floor, his hands clenched into fists. Poirot straightened, his thoughts sifting through the revelation. Vogel was a tool, yes, but in whose hand? Sophia Moretti, with her burning ambition, Herba, shielding his corrupt past, or another player, yet unseen? Tell me, doctor, Poirot said, his tone softening. Did you see anyone near her chalet that night? Anyone who might have wielded the needle? Vogel hesitated, then nodded slowly. I glimpsed a figure in the snow near the chalets, a woman, I think slender, quick, but it was dark, and I dared not linger. Pooh's pulse quickened, though his expression remained serene. A woman, you say, and you kept this to yourself? I was afraid, Vogel whispered. I thought it a trick of the night, or someone I could not cross. I swear I did not kill her. Poirot rose, his movements precise, his mind already tracing the next thread. Thank you, doctor, you have shed light where there was shadow. I suggest you speak of this to no one. The truth must emerge in its own time. As he left the infirmary, Poirot's thoughts churned like the snow beyond the windows. Vogel's confession pointed to coercion, a woman in the shadows, perhaps Sophia Moretti, whose ambition might have driven her to secure the poison from this very room. Yet the doctor's fear hinted at a broader web, a conspiracy that entangled more than one soul. The aria's theme of betrayal lingered in his mind, a haunting echo that might yet unmask the killer. He found Gore waiting in the corridor, his calm presence a steady anchor, a most revealing encounter. Gore, Poirot murmured, the doctor is ensnared, but the trap's maker remains hidden. We must watch closely, for the snow conceals more than it reveals. Indeed, sir, Gore replied, his voice even. Poirot paused at a window, gazing out at the snow-laden peaks, their silent majesty a stark contrast to the turmoil within the resort's walls. Whodunit approached, his face etched with worry. Miss Poirot, the guests grow anxious. Have you progress? Patience, Whodunit, Poirot said, his tone reassuring. The pieces align. Though the picture is not yet clear, rest assured order will be restored. Dupin nodded, his relief tentative, and withdrew. Poirot turned to Gore, his voice low but resolute. Miss Clara may have seen this woman too, perhaps in the lounge with Madame Rossi and Sophia Moretti. She must be questioned. Again the game deepens. George, but Hercule Poirot shall not be outplayed. With a precise tug at his coat, he set off down the corridor, his mind a whirl of deduction. The resort's luxury masked a deadly dance, and the next step would bring him closer to the truth, a truth he would unveil with the patience and brilliance that defined him. The library of the Alpine resort stood as a fortress of quiet amid the storm, its oak paneled walls and towering shelves of leather-bound volumes absorbing the faint crackle of the fire that glowed in the hearth beyond. The wide windows, snow fell in a relentless shroud, piling higher against the glass, its weight a silent testament to the isolation that gripped the peaks. The air within was warm, tinged with the scents of aged paper and burning pine, yet a chill lingered, an undercurrent of tension that Hercule Poirot felt keenly as he stood before the hearth, his small, meticulous figure silhouetted by the embers glow. His gloved hands were clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes gleaming with the calm authority of a man who held the threads of a mystery in his grasp. Before him the suspect sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, their faces a gallery of guarded emotion. Sophia Moretti, her dark eyes fixed on her clasped hands, her Franz Bauer, his silver hair catching the firelight, his posture rigid. Luca Peterson, his sun-bronzed hands restless on his knees, and Gore's a steady presence by the door. His silence, a quiet anchor the room, seemed to hold its breath, the snow outside muffling all sound into a hush, as if the mountains themselves awaited Poirot's next move. He turned to face them, his voice cutting through the stillness with measured precision. "Messamy, we are gathered here to unmask a truth most grim. Madame Elena Rossi did not perish by the caprice of nature. She was murdered with a poison most cunning." A murmur rippled through the group. Sophia's fingers tightened. Bauer's jaw clenched. Luca's eyes widened, but Pooh raised a hand commanding silence. "The weapon," continued, his tone as steady as a metronome, "was rare toxin delivered through a needle so fine it left but a whisper of a mark upon her wrist. The faint scent of almonds, which I detected upon her robe in the snow, betrayed the presence of cyanide. A poison swift and merciless." Sophia's gaze darted to the floor, a flicker of unease crossing her poised features, while Bauer shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing behind his spectacles. Luca swallowed hard, his hand stilled as if braced for judgment. Poirot's attention turned to Bauer, his voice softening into a velvet probe. "You hair." Bauer had much to lose, he said, stepping closer, his eyes piercing. "Madame Rossi held proof of your corruption, bribes taken to sway your critiques, a scandal that would shatter your reputation, and in your room I found a vial hastily concealed, a curious trinket you claimed." Bauer's face flushed, his composure fraying like worn thread. "That vial is nothing," he snapped, his voice sharp with defiance. "A souvenir. As I told you, I did not kill her." Poirot's smile was faint, his gaze unwavering. "I have considered this, Herr Bauer. Your notes, which you so reluctantly shared, confirm you were writing your review that night, a task that occupied you fully, and Miss Clara saw you leave your room briefly near midnight, agitated but empty-handed, returning swiftly. The vial I have since learned contains a tonic for your nerves, not cyanide. You feared exposure, yes, and Madame Rossi's threats drove you to desperation, but not to murder." Bauer's shoulders slumped, a mixture of relief and shame etching his features. She would have ruined me," he admitted, his voice low, almost a growl. "She had evidence, letters, dates I paid to silence others, but her I could not sway, yet I swear I did not touch her." Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet satisfaction, then turned to Luca Peterson, whose hands now gripped the armrests, his face pale beneath its sun-broned hue. "And you, Msai Peterson," Poirot said, his tone gentle but insistent, "bore a grudge deep and festering. Madame Rossi's influence cost you your medical career, a wound that has not healed, as you yourself confessed." Luca's eyes flashed with old pain in his voice. "I hated her, yes. She mocked me that night, called me a failure, but I did not kill her, Miss Poirot, I swear." Pooh's gaze softened, though his scrutiny remained sharp. "Your anger is real, monsieur, and I have felt its weight. Yet I have learned from the porter that you retired to your quarters well before the hour of her death, seen ascending the stairs, while a guest lingered late in the lounge below. The stairs are the only exit, and the guest would have seen you had you attempted to descend again. You could not have reached her chalet unseen. Your bitterness is a scar, but it did not drive you to wield the fatal needle." Luca exhaled, his relief a tangible force, though his hands trembled still. "Thank you, Morrow. I feared you would judge me guilty." Poirot inclined his head, then addressed the group at large, his voice rising with quiet authority. "Thus we see that neither Herbaugh nor Msai Peterson had the means or opportunity to commit this crime. The evidence, so carefully sifted, exonerates them both. But the question remains, who did?" Sophia Moretti's hands stilled in her lap, her face a mask of calm, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety, a subtle shift that Poirot noted with the precision of a watchmaker. He paused, letting the silence stretch, then spoke again, his tone deceptively light. "There is one final piece, a manuscript found among Madame Rossi's effects, tucked within the score of the aria she rehearsed. It speaks of betrayal, much like the melody that haunted her final days, and it may hold the key to her murder. I shall reveal its contents in due time." A faint gasp escaped Sophia, her fingers tightening on her dress, though she quickly masked it with a cough. Bauer frowned, his curiosity piqued, while Luca glanced between them, puzzled but silent. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. He had planted the seed, and now he would watch it take root. He stepped back, his tone brightening, as if dismissing a trivial Matter for now, messieurs, I bid you good evening. The truth draws near, and it shall not elude us long as. The group rose their murmurs, trailing like smoke. Poirot turned to Gore, his voice a low murmur. The trap is set. Gore. Mademoiselle Moretti faltered at the mention of the manuscript. Her composure cracked. However, briefly, she will act, and when she does, we shall be ready. Gore nodded, his expression impassive indeed, sir. The net Titans. Poirot gazed out at the snow-laden peaks, their silent majesty a stark contrast to the turmoil within the resort's walls. The fake manuscript, a letter he had crafted, suggesting Madame Rossi suspected her understudy's jealousy, had been placed among her belongings. Its existence whispered only to this room. The aria's theme of betrayal now pointed to her guilt. A melody she could not escape. The stage was set for the final act, and Hercule Poirot, with his patience and precision, would ensure that justice took its bow. The library of the Alpine resort stood cloaked in the hush of anticipation, its oak pan-led walls and towering shelves of leather-bound volumes absorbing the faint crackle of the fire that glowed in the hearth beyond the wide windows. Snow fell in a relentless shroud, its weight pressing against the glass like a silent witness to the drama. Within, Hercule Poirot stood before the hearth, his small, meticulous figure framed by the embers' glow, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. His sharp green eyes gleamed with quiet authority as he surveyed the assembled suspects. Sophia Moretti, her dark eyes wide and restless, hair France Bauer, his silver hair catching the firelight, his posture stiff. Luca Peterson, his sun-bronzed hands clenched on his knees. Dr. Vogel, his spectacles perched low on his nose, his gaze darting nervously, and Mr. Dupont, his polished facade marred by a faint sheen of sweat. Gore stood by the door, a steady presence, while Miss Clara lingered near the shelves, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Poirot's voice cut through the stillness, steady and precise. Mesame, we are gathered here to unmask a murderer, a soul consumed by ambition, who silenced Madame Elena Rossi with a poison most cunning. A murmur swept the room. Sophia's fingers tightened on her dress. Bauer's jaw clenched. Luca's eyes widened. But Poirot raised a hand commanding silence. In our last meeting I exonerated Herr Bauer and Monsieur Peterson for the evidence, cleared them of guilt, yet one among us remains whose mask of innocence has slipped. He turned first to Bauer, his tone measured. Herr Bauer, you feared Madame Rossi's threat to expose your bribery, a scandal that would end your career, yet your vial was a nerve tonic, not cyanide, and your review kept you occupied that night, as Miss Clara's observation confirmed. Bauer nodded stiffly, his relief tinged with shame. Poirot shifted his gaze to Luca. Monsieur Peterson, the tension between you and Madame Rossi was deep, her mockery a bitter sting, but the porter saw you retire early, and the snow bore no trace of your path to her chalet. Luca exhaled, his hands relaxing slightly. Poirot's attention then settled on Sophia, his eyes piercing yet gentle. Mademoiselle Moretti, you spoke of the area. Madame Rossi rehearsed a tale of betrayal. It was a melody that haunted her, yes, but it was you who turned its theme into reality. Sophia's face palled, her voice a whisper. I do not understand, Mr. Poirot. Poirot's smile was faint, his tone soft but unrelenting. You understood all too well, mademoiselle. Your ambition burned bright to take her place, to claim the stage. She commanded. She stood in your way, a star whose light you could not eclipse, so you acted with a plan as delicate as it was deadly. He stepped closer, his small, precise steps echoing in the tense silence of the room, his eyes sharp and unyielding. Never left her as you obtained a rare poison from Dr. Vogel, a toxin that mimics hypothermia, exploiting his debts and fear. But let us be clear, mademoiselle, how this came to be. For the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot leave no thread unexamined. He paused, tilting his head slightly, as if savoring the unraveling of his own thoughts. Dr. Vogel confessed earlier to me, did he not? He spoke of a man, a shadowy figure, who threatened him, leveraging the good doctor's gambling debts to force him to declare Madame Rossi's death as hypothermia, a convenient lie to mask the truth. And he saw a woman near the chalets that night, a figure in the snow he could not identify. But I, Poirot, have asked myself, who connects these threads? Who had the motive, the cunning to weave such a tapestry of deceit? Sophia's lips parted, but no sound escaped. Poirot raised a gloved hand, silencing her before she could protest. You, Mademoiselle Moretti, visited Dr. Vogel's infirmary the day Before the murder, oh yes I have. Confirmed this through the word of his assistant, who recalled your presence, claiming you sought a sedative for your nerves, a clever pretense, Nesper, but Dr. Vogel, trembling under the weight of his debts, provided you with more than a sedative. He gave you a toxin, a rare poison, that leaves the body cold and still as if kissed by the mountain frost itself. Dr. Vogel, seated nearby, flinched, his voice a desperate rasp. I didn't know she said it was for sleep. I feared the man who came to me, the one who knew of my debts. Pooh turned his gaze to the doctor, for a moment his expression almost pitying. Oui, doctor, you were coerced by a man, but that man, I suspect, was no stranger to Mademoiselle Moretti. Perhaps she enlisted him, or perhaps he was a tool she manipulated through whispers of reward or ruin. It matters not. What matters is this: you supplied the poison, and she wielded it. He pivoted back to Sophia, his voice growing firmer. You brought Madame Rossi a bouquet of winter roses that night, a gesture of apparent kindness, but concealed within those thorns was a needle laced with the toxin you had so carefully acquired. A single prick to her wrist as you handed her the flowers, swift, subtle. Unseen, the scent of almonds lingered on her robe, a faint echo of cyanide mistaken by all for the whims of the Alpine air, and so she fell her death, disguised as nature's cruelty, while you stood poised to take her place. Sophia's hands clenched into fists, her voice trembling with defiance. This is nonsense. You have no proof. Poirot's smile was faint but triumphant. The proof, mademoiselle, lies in the details. The assistant's testimony places you at the infirmary. The doctor's fear confirms the coercion you orchestrated. The woman seen near the chalets matches your form, a slender figure in the snow as Dr. Vogel described, and the roses discarded near her body, their thorns still bearing the faintest trace of your intent. The puncture mark on her wrist, the almond scent, all point to you. You exploited Dr. Vogel's weakness, directed the coercion, and struck with precision. Hercule Poirot sees all. Sophia's composure shattered, her voice rising in panic. No, I did not. Poirot's tone softened, though his gaze remained steady. And the manuscript I spoke of, a letter I crafted suggesting Madame Rossi suspected your jealousy. It was a lure, and you took the bait. When I revealed it, your fear betrayed you. You sought to retrieve it, to silence its imagined accusation, but it was a phantom, a trap that led you to this moment. Sophia slumped in her chair, tears spilling down her cheeks. I only wanted my chance, she whispered, her voice breaking. She had everything: fame, adoration. I thought if she were gone, the stage would be mine. Pooh's expression was one of quiet sorrow, his voice a murmur. Ambition, when unchecked, becomes a poison of its own. Mademoiselle, you have taken a life, and now you must face the consequence. As Sophia's sobs filled the room, Cy Dupont stepped forward, his face etched with relief and sorrow. Mourn it is over. The nightmare ends. Pooh inclined his head, his tone gentle. Yes, monsieur, the snow may conceal, but it cannot hide the truth forever. He gazed out at the snow-laden peaks, their silent majesty, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. The resort's opulence had masked a deadly dance, but order was restored. The melody of justice played to its final note. As the group dispersed, Poirot turned to Gore, his voice low but resolute. The curtain falls, Gore, and the stage is clear. Let us hope that ambition in its next act chooses a kinder path. With a final triumphant flourish of his mustache, Hercule Poirot unveils the truth, restoring warmth to the frostbitten halls of the Alpine resort. The puzzle is complete. Sophia Moretti, driven by ambition and envy, wielded a poisoned needle to silence her rival. The faint scent of almonds, the puncture mark on the wrist, these were the notes of a deadly melody that only Poirot could decipher. Order is restored, the culprit unmasked, and the mountains stand silent, once more their secrets laid bare. We trust you've savored this intricate dance of deduction. If you'd like to support Nocturnal Tales and delve deeper into such mysteries, consider joining our YouTube membership program for exclusive content, or visit our Buy Me a Coffee page, link in the description. Thank you for listening. Until we meet again, keep your eyes sharp and your wits sharper still.